Okay, welcome everyone, our viewers, auditors, those who may be listening to this special segment of Talmud for Everyone, which I call Two Scholars and a Talmud. It's my pleasure today to interview Dr. Yakir Englander, who is the Senior National Director of Leadership Programs at the Israeli American Council. Yakir also teaches at the AJR, a rabbinical school in New York. Originally from the Haredi community of Israel, Englander obtained his PhD from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem in Jewish philosophy and gender studies. He was a Fulbright scholar and a visiting professor of religion at Northwestern University, the Shalom Hartman Institute, and Harvard Divinity School. In addition, he served as a director at Kids for Peace, an interfaith youth movement in Jerusalem and other cities in North America. Yakir lives in an intentional community in Philadelphia, practices karate, meditation, and focuses on the relationship between body and mind. And recently, Yakir became a father, so Mazal Tov, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for doing this show. We also have a special relationship. We were roommates at the Hebrew University during our undergraduate year, 2001 to 2002. That was quite a time for both of us, memorable moments. Look what time has done to both of us. Here we are. We're going to study the Talmud together in a rather unique way. Different from the other interviews, we're going to actually just go dive into the Talmud. Yakir is going to lead us through the study of some texts about Rabbi Ishmael, and share with us why he thinks the study of the Talmud is still relevant for today. But before we do that, Yakir, you have a unique story, unique background, and relationship with the Talmud that I think our viewers would be very interested in learning about. When did you first encounter the Talmud and learn to study Talmud?
I think that in my past reincarnations, in the womb of my mother, the Talmud was my world. So as you mentioned, and by the way, such a gift to be here with you, Isaac, and to study together. When I grow up, as you mentioned, I grew up in an ultra-Orthodox community, or some people know it as more the Hasidim. Books like My Name is Asher Lev, The Chosen of Chaim Potok, so just a few reminders. And so I didn't grow up in a Western society. I grew up in a community that was living next to Western society. So a lot of the assumptions that we have in life were not relevant to my life in my past. And one of them is like, what does it mean to be in the world? So when you think about, like, if you will ask an American, what does it mean to be in the world today? So like, meaning, what are the assumptions that we have in society that influence who we are? What are the powers that force us to be that we can agree to? Maybe we love them, but maybe it's also hurt us, right? So I think like today, if we think about America, there are questions around what does it mean to be white, right? I mean, we are both, will be called white people, although we are both strangers, we are foreigners, we didn't grow up in America. And we are both men, or at least it looks like that we have male bodies. And all of that has a lot of implication to life. So for me, when I grew up in the Haredi or ultra-Orthodox world, it was the Talmud. I mean, the Talmud was the main text that men, and it's interesting, very important, only men, the life of men are involved with these texts. So people, if you ask a person what is the most important Jewish text, so many people from outside, they will say the Bible, right? The Torah, the 5 books of Moses. This is very Christian view, I think, on, or secular view on Judaism. If you ask ultra-Orthodox people what is the most important text, it's of course the Talmud. The difference between the Bible and the Talmud is that the Bible tells you what God wants. And in the Bible, we say, in the Talmud, we say to God, I hear you, and no. I think this is a main difference. So if you can ask me, so, hey, whoa, this is a chutzpah thing, right? I mean, it's such a not way that you behave with the divine. The answer is, when you say no to someone, you have 2 ways how to say that. You can say, no, I disagree, or I don't want a relationship with you. Or you can say, I love you so much, and the relationship between us and you, between me and you, is so important, so I need to tell you sometimes no. I have one of my community member, they are incredible teacher around sexuality. And a few days ago, they told me what boundary is. And they said like that, boundary is the thing that you put between you and another person in order that you can love yourself enough so you can also love them. So I put boundary, or the ultra-Orthodox or the Talmud put boundary to the divine and to the divine love to Israel, to the divine complexity with Israel, anger, so many feelings that the divine has in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, and later in the prophet, in the Bible. And the Talmud says, if I want to have a covenant with you, the divine, I need to put boundary. And this boundary is going to let me not to be crushed by you, even by your love, but it's going to give me freedom to find myself so I can love myself enough so I also can love you. And this is mature relationship, I think, that Judaism made between us and God. So this was my life. And in many ways, this is still my life. I mean, my life is around to try to understand life, the world, you can call it the divine, and to try to understand what I need in order to love myself enough so I also can be owed by the world. I can really look with tenderness on life and the divine. So yeah, this is my relation with the Talmud. So I will say one more thing. The Talmud was so much part of my life that if someone will ask me, do you know what Rabbi Yosef says in the Talmud about a question? Probably not. But I can go to sleep or meditate, and since Rabbi Yosef is such a good friend of mine, he's my buddy, because I had so much quality time with him that I can probably tell you not what he says, but what he felt when the question was asked. And I think this is the intimacy that I have with the Talmud.
I see. This is a lot to unpack there. But so one thing I hear from what you're saying is that for the Haredi community, sometimes called ultra-Orthodox in English, which can include the Hasidic Jews, and you were part of a Hasidic community, Vizhnitz to be more specific,
Right, the dynasty of Vishnitz, yes.
dynasty of Vizhnitz, that the Talmud in some ways is more important than the Tanakh or the Bible.
Much more.
Much more. And that Judaism, we might say, is not the religion of the book, as sometimes is called, but of many books, because the Talmud contains 63 tractates, and then there's even more rabbinic literature. So this is the primary focus is on the Talmudic literature. The second thing I hear from what you're saying is to study Talmud, it sounds like it is to wrestle with ideas, wrestle with God. The Talmud is, by its very nature, argumentative. And perhaps we can use the imagery of what I was thinking while you were sharing this, the image of Jacob wrestling with the mysterious being as some kind of symbol of the Israelite wrestling with God, wrestling with these texts through the reading and the formulation of the Talmudic text.
Right, and the name Israel is to struggle with the divine, right? Isra, Sarita, with El, with God. This is the whole point.
So, and then the third thing is, you have this very personal, familiar connection with the Talmud that started, you said, already in your womb, if I understood correctly. But when specifically do people start studying the Talmud? At what age in, say, a Hasidic community like Vizhnitz?
So my child is now 8 weeks old, exactly today, and he knows the Talmud now. I mean, why he knows? Because he sleep on in my shoulder when I study Talmud. This is a relationship. Like he listened, he knows the world by my music that I do when I read the Talmud next to him and pray.
Okay.
Technically, you started when you are, I don't know, 7, but believe me, you know the Talmud before.
You know
You know
what?
the stories. You grow up with your father. You walk to the synagogue. You are 2 years old, and your father tell you stories. I mean, this is everything for us. Is the Talmud
Okay, so the Talmud is embedded in all aspects,
embedded, somatic embedded?
somatically embedded,
Yeah,
which is unique because in the majority of the Jewish world, the Talmud is a kind of strange or uncharted text. So, and this is maybe one of the goals of our platform, Talmud for Everyone, is to make the Talmud more available. So, thanks so much for sharing that.
but Isaac, you know, there is something that a teacher of mine around death. His name is Stephen Jenkinson. I admire him.
Mhm.
And he said something very important about communities. And he said, if a person today in America want to live in a community, it will never be natural for him or her or them.
Right.
But you can work today, so for your children it will be natural because they will be born into that. I feel the same with the Talmud. The difference between me and most of my American Jewish friends, that for me it's in my body. It's seriously, it's embedded in my body. For them, it's like learning from here and then slowly praying that it will go into their bodies. So it's huge different.
Fascinating. So a holistic experience with the Talmud, not just a cerebral uh,
Yeah.
with the text. Would you say that is like Hasidic, a Hasidic view, particularly Hasidic view of the Talmud, or
Of all the ultra Orthodox.
Haredi in general, the
Yes.
Orthodox community in general?
Yeah.
So you continue to study the Talmud and you find it relevant for today.
I hated it, right? I mean, for sure, I was hating it. It was boring, right? I mean, to study all day the Talmud. This is what we did. And from when you went to high school, I went to the yeshiva, the institute, and this is what we did from morning to and outside of like praying and some Jewish halacha law. We studied Talmud all day, and it was really boring and hard. And it's another language, right? It's in Aramaic. So it's very complex, and there are interpreters of interpreters of interpreters. So it's love-hate language. But actually, I think like when I left the community, my relationship with the Talmud slowly came back because I was not anymore told to study the Talmud and how to study. There are many ways how to study. And today we are not going to study it as ultra-Orthodox. We're going to study the Talmud in ways that the ultra-Orthodox will say like that this is like only atheists can study like that. But this is where I also, only when I left, I could bring my femininity. Remember, women are not allowed to touch the Talmud. I could bring my femininity and my holistic view into the Talmud. And then slowly I learned that the Talmud is so much more complex and beautiful to me.
Okay, so lead us then into this encounter with the Talmud as you see it now.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about you've suggested we study about a certain figure, Rabbi Ishmael, and go through some texts. We're going to provide these texts also in the description below the interview for today, so that people can also encounter the text firsthand. But Yakir, so the way we're following this is I'm gonna read the texts and you're going to interrupt me.
All the time. Yes,
Time.
exactly.
Okay, it's gonna be back
Yes.
and forth a discussion. So let's go ahead
Yeah,
and
so just a few words about why I choose, because for me, I didn't choose a text. I choose, and this is again, look at the difference between academic and non-academic, or like someone who grew up in the ultra-Orthodox. I didn't choose to study a text. What I choose is to study an image of one rabbi. And in order to understand this rabbi, I'm not interested in understanding what is in the text or how this rabbi acts. I want to understand his being. His being. I want to understand the essence of him. Now, I choose a rabbi. His name is Rabbi Ishmael. That, first of all, it's interesting his name. Because Ishmael, Isaac, we both know that in the Bible, Ishmael is a bad guy. Ishmael is the second son, or the first son, sorry, of Abraham, right? The one who was born from the non-Jewish, from the slave, right? From Hagar, the foreigner. And his name is Ishmael. God will listen. Now, it's fascinating that someone will call. Now, in the Bible, it looks that Ishmael was a bad guy. He cared about sword and killing, and then he's in the desert. And of course, our Jewish imagination go to Arab sometimes, right? It's a complex life that Jews have with Ishmael. So just imagine that someone will choose in the Talmud to call his child, I don't know, Hitler. It doesn't make sense. Something doesn't make sense. Now, it means, for me, now I speak now with a Jewish interpretation from the mystical point of view, not from the Talmud, but from the mystical point of view, much later, that the Talmud choose to share with us an image that his name is Rabbi Ishmael, because they wanted to heal the trauma that Jews have with this son of Abraham that we hate so much. That it's a process of healing. One more thing that we are going to see about Rabbi Ishmael, that he is very pretty. And this is why I thought that it will be fascinating to bring his image to us, to Talmud, for everyone. Because we all deal with people that they are pretty. I remember someone told me when I was dating, I came to my friend, he's a beautiful man, and I told him, it's so hard for me to go to a party and to start chatting with someone that maybe I'm interested to date with. And he said, oh my God, come with me. It's not so hard. I will help you. And I said, of course, when you're pretty like you, when you're so handsome, it's not so hard. And he really stopped himself. And he said, Yakir, I really apologize. Yes, you are right. There are powers, and I have the privilege of beauty. But I think what the Talmud is going to show us, that Rabbi Ishmael, who is so pretty, and I specifically said pretty and not handsome, okay, I choose in my words, it's much more complex. Okay, it's much more complex. So now let's study the first text, and we will see. We have kind of an hour, so we see how many texts we are going to have. You're going to read it in English, and I'm going to stop you.
Fascinating, yeah. So the name choice Ishmael, so that is very, very intriguing. I mean, you did make a comparison with Hitler, which is a very, very strong comparison. Maybe Ishmael at this time, the relationships weren't so sour as they unfortunately are as we speak right now between some Jews and some Arabs, at least, to say
exactly right. So it's like to call someone Rabbi Muhammad, peace be upon him, right? It's complex.
It is fascinating. Ishmael, nevertheless, regardless of the fluctuating relationships between Jews and Arabs, which weren't always marked by adversity, is nevertheless a name that is given here in the text to this sage. I mean, in the Talmud, there is a rabbi called Rabbi Ishmael, a very important rabbi, by the way, and that he's named after the firstborn son of Abraham, and that we do have this kind of brotherly rivalry in the Tanakh, in the Bible, between Ishmael and Isaac. So that's something very interesting.
No, it's not Yakir. When you go to the mystical books, like the book of reincarnation, which was written, of course, very late, right, in the 16th century. So it says that Rabbi Ishmael is the reincarnation of Ishmael.
That's
right?
so. That's interesting.
Okay, good.
So Ishmael, very important for our viewers. Tana, so the Tanaim were rabbinic sages from the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, approximately. There's even a midrash named after Rabbi Ishmael, so a midrashic work named after him. So I'll go ahead and start reading. We're starting with a text from the Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli, which is the most widely read text by Jews if they do read the Talmud. This one, there is another Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, less studied. Did you study, just out of curiosity, the Jerusalem Talmud, the Yerushalmi, growing up in
No one studied it.
Nobody studies it. Okay.
No one studied. Now, of course, in another time, Isaac, we can start thinking why Jews choose not to study the Torah from Israel, but the Torah from America. Babylon was the America of that time. And it may be some implication for our life today, but let's leave it for now.
Yeah, that's a whole topic in its own right.
Exactly.
When we
Another
say
time.
Talmud, most people think Babylonian Talmud, the Bavli. And so that's where we're starting. We're in tractate Gittin. So it's one of the tractates. The Talmud's divided into tractates. So I'm just going to start reading. And Yakir, you interrupt me when
I promise.
I know you will. All right. There was an incident involving Rabbi Yehoshua ben Ḥananya, who once went to the great city of Rome, where they said to him, there is a child in prison with beautiful eyes and an attractive appearance, and his curly hair is arranged in locks.
Adkan. Let's stop here.
Right.
So, summarize for our students, for our chavruta that we're studying, who are listening to us. What do we have here? So we have a story about Rabbi Yehoshua, the son of Ḥananya. What we know about him, that he is the most ugly person in the Talmud. Okay, his nickname is ugly. He's so ugly that the daughter of the Roman emperor came to him and she asked, how comes that God gave so much Torah to such an ugly vessel? So this guy, who is walking existentially in the world, knows that he's so ugly. He's going to Rome, right? He's going from Israel to Rome because he heard that there is a baby, a child, in prison. And of course, we know what does it mean, prison. And I will ask you the question, who do you think from the Bible we quote here? What's a metaphor that we walk here? So let's wait for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is it prison? It's a prison that in their narrative is also a place where the prisoners are sexually abused. And it will come again and again. Again, this is a view that we have about the prison. Okay, it's not about the history.
Right.
And we know something about this child, and this is very interesting. He had beautiful eyes, an attractive appearance. These are quotation actually from the Bible. We will come to that. And he has curly hair, is arranged in locks. Now, I'm really sorry for people who didn't grow up in the ultra-Orthodox world, because for you and me, Isaac, that we are living the Talmud, we know that this is all a description of a biblical figure. We speak here about Joseph.
I was thinking about Joseph, and you have prison. Joseph went to prison, and Joseph was very beautiful. The Bible says so. I mean, according to the text.
Exactly the same terms. It's like exactly the same metaphors. This quotation from the Bible, from Genesis. And also we know that there is another midrash, another text from that time, that describe Joseph as someone who has curly hair, is arranged in locks.
Interesting.
So we're coming here to Joseph. And what do we know about Joseph? That Joseph was in the prison of the Egyptians because he was a slave, and the wife of the mister, right? I don't know of the owner of Joseph.
Potiphar, yes.
Exactly. She wanted to sexually abuse him. and he didn't want. It's very complex. And then she said that he tried to rape her, and he was sent to jail. This is why I told you that when we speak here about jail, it's clear that there is sexual abuse involved. Otherwise, why the Romans took from Israel a little child to the jail? Naturally, in the Talmudic mind, he was so pretty. Okay, by the way, the description here of prettiness is of a feminine prettiness. Same issue with Joseph. It's not of a male handsome. So we have here erotic between gender. And because he's so pretty, they take him, of course, to the prison in order to sexual abuse him, to use him as a whore. So the pretty boys that we have in the Talmud, the most pretty boy, which is Ishmael, he is actually a sex worker without choice.
Right, because we're going to learn here in just a second that this pretty boy is Rabbi Ishmael.
Exactly. We are going to come that this boy is going to become rabbi. Here he is just a sex worker and a boy. So there is there is zero consent. And it's very important, the question of consent. And this is why Isaac, I'm jumping for today, I love the Talmud. Because the Talmud, in a way, bring a subject that today we are dealing with. We are dealing, everyone who is listening to our learning, we all know how much today, after Me Too, we are dealing with question of consent, question of beauty, question of sexual abuse. And the most ugly rabbi, Rabbi Yehoshua, he hears that there is such a pretty, feminine boy in the prison, so he's going to try to release him from prison. Now, let's keep learning. Unless, Isaac, you want to edit things, of course.
No, this is very interesting. So let's keep on reading.
Yalla.
Rabbi Yehoshua went and stood by the entrance to the prison. He said, quote, "Who gave Jacob for a spoil and Israel to the robbers?" End quote. This is taken from Isaiah chapter 42, verse 24. That child answered by reciting, quote, "Did not the Lord, he against whom we have sinned, and in whose ways they would not walk, neither were they obedient to his law," end quote. Rabbi Yehoshua said, "I am certain that if given the opportunity, this child will issue halachic rulings in Israel by the temple service that I will not move from here until I ransom him for whatever sum of money they set for him." And we should just
Let's talk.
halachic
Yes.
rulings, maybe you can explain what halachic
No,
is.
go with that. I actually love that. Can you just give a summary of just what's happening here?
So there's what I see here is an exchange between Rabbi Yehoshua and mind you, this is a child. In the Hebrew, it says, if I'm not mistaken, tinok, right?
A
Tinok,
baby.
he could be even a baby. So I'm thinking he's a wunderkind, a wonder boy, a genius of sorts, because he's a baby, but he can talk already. And he can strike a conversation with an adult and exchange passages from the Bible. He knows that Rabbi Yehoshua is quoting from the Bible, from the book of Isaiah, and quotes back in return. Now, the word halachic, right, just halacha, basically is legal stipulation laws that are formulated in the Talmud about how to observe the Torah, correct?
100%. So, and then what he did, Rabbi Yehoshua?
So then he replies, he said, "I am certain," right? He's like, he's amazed at this child. He's certain he will become some kind of genius, and so wants to ransom him from captivity.
Great, exactly. So two things that I want to bring here. One is, it doesn't say in the Hebrew that he's going to be halachic ruler. It says in the Hebrew, shemoreh hora'ah. He's going to be a teacher of, it is true, but I think it's not only halacha. I think he's going to be someone who is going to teach, but in a huge scale.
That's important to point out, just for those who will be watching rather than listening to this interview. The English translation that is displayed, the words that are in bold provide a literal translation, let's say
Exactly.
Hebrew. But then we have words that aren't in bold that are paraphrasing or adding to the translation to facilitate comprehension
Facilitate.
of text. So
Thank you.
the original does not have halachic, as you are highlighting right now. It has hora'ah, which is a more general term.
Right. Right. Exactly. Lehorot. He's going to, he can be like a pastor.
Mhm.
Um, now I'm less interested in whatever exactly is going to be. What
Uh,
I'm interested is that Rabbi Yehoshua, he's going to find a child that there is something very unique about him. Now, you said like a wonder child. Now, what is so interesting about him? So, one is that he can quote verses. And I think it will be not the right time now to go exactly why he choose Rabbi Yehoshua, choose like this specific verse and why Rabbi Ishmael, this baby child, and quoted another verse. What I'm interested is that there are two things unique about the child. One, that he's very pretty, and therefore he is sex worker. And second, that he knows how to quote verses. And in a way, the verses that he quote is telling you that he's not blaming only God for the disasters that he's suffering from. That he understands that there is responsibility of the Jewish people for the situation that they are at, that they are under the ruling of the Romans. And as a result of that, the children who are so pretty like him are taken to be sex workers in Rome. Now, this is huge. But there is one more thing that I want to look here, and this is about the term ha'avodah,
mhm.
meaning ha'avodah means I swear. הוא מבטיח, הוא נשבע. Swear is להישבע, נכון, Isaac?
Yeah, in English, usually translated as swear. Yeah.
Yeah. So he swears that he's not going to move from here, but he will demand that the Jewish community will give any amount of money that the Romans will demand from him until I can release him.
Mhm.
Now, why it's so fascinating? Because the question that I want to ask you, Isaac,
Mhm.
or to the listeners is why he need to swear?
Which is something that you normally should avoid.
100%. Thank you so much.
So it's a pretty serious matter.
Yes. I think, Isaac, that we need to remember that according to the Jewish law,
Mhm.
there are rules how much money you are allowed to pay to release a prisoner. And we all know that there is an amount that you are allowed to pay, and then there is an amount that you are not allowed to pay. Because if the Jewish community will start paying so much money or giving assets for each prisoners, it will just make the Romans to take more prisoners. So in a way, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Korcha, this ben Ḥananya, this ugly man, he's doing something against the Jewish law. He says, I don't care how much it costs. I don't care that according to the Jewish law, we are not allowed to release this sex worker. I demand from the Jewish community to release him in whatever amount of money, because this boy is going to be the pastor, the teacher of the Jewish community in the future. Now, this is huge. By the way, we are speaking now when there are 134 hostages in Gaza, right? And there is a debate in Israel. How much prisoners, Hamas terrorists, Jihad Islamic terrorists, we can release for these hostages, right? It is a debate. And Rabbi Yehoshua says, I don't care. I swear I'm not moving from here until it's going to happen.
So that's interesting.
Let's
He might be transgressing potentially transgressing the Torah in a twofold way. I mean, first by swearing, which you should avoid, because then you're bound by the oath that you make. And then even by willing to go to whatever amount of money is necessary. And there are limits, you're saying, limits in the Jewish rabbinic tradition of how much money can be given to redeem a Jewish slave. So that's
exactly.
very interesting. But yeah, let's go ahead and keep on reading.
Please.
So they said that he did not move from there until he ransomed him for a great sum of money. And not even a few, you'll need to scroll down a bit, Yakir, so I can continue reading. Not even a few days had passed when this child then issued rulings in Israel. And who was this child? This was Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha.
So what I want to do, how much more time do we have, Isaac?
And I'm looking here I think we can do like another 15, 20 minutes. How about that?
Fantastic. Fantastic. So what I want to do is, I want you to read, please, the next story, okay, about the children of Rabbi Ishmael. Just to read the story. We're not going to dive deep into.
All right. So this is, the next
Rabbi
paragraph.
Yehuda says that Rav says.
So Rav Yehuda says that Rav says there was an incident involving the son and the daughter of Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, the high priest, who were taken captive to two different masters.
You see again the trauma, the intergenerational trauma? Okay.
Right, because here it's the children who are being taken captive.
You also saw that Rabbi Ishmael, as we know, he is the highest priest. He's not only the rabbi. He served also as a high priest. We have a famous song, famous quotation in the Talmud that became a famous song, that Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha went on Yom Kippur to the Holy of the Holy in the second temple, right? And he meets Katriel, he meets the divine. And the divine says, now it's interesting because it doesn't say the divine, it says Katriel. And Katriel in the Midrash is Metatron, who is Enoch. Maybe his father? Okay. So, and he says, Ishmael, my son. Interesting that they call him his son. And he said, bless me. So there is a relationship between the father, the divine, and the son Ishmael. And now we have a story about the children of him. So what happened to this boy, who became the most important rabbi, the chief priest? What happened to the children of him? Intergenerational trauma. They're taking again to be sex workers in two different masters.
Right. So this is just for the viewers, very interesting. Rabbis are not priests, but some of the rabbis in the Talmud are of priestly lineage. And Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha happens to be of a priestly lineage, and even according to the Talmud, served in the temple and was the high priest. So we might say crème de la crème within the priestly genealogy. And the text you were alluding to, where he goes into the Holy of Holies, we have this Katriel, who might be some kind of embodiment of the divine, asking Rabbi Ishmael, if I'm not mistaken, Yakir, to bless me, right?
Yeah, what I'm saying. God asked
Ishmael asking to be blessed,
100%.
divine asking to be blessed by, which is interesting text in its own right. But so here we're talking about the son and the daughter of Rabbi Ishmael, who now also end up being taken captive, and as we're going to see, for sexual sex work. So let's just keep on reading here. So after some time, the two masters met in a certain place. So, right. So this is the master who owned the son, and then the other master owned the daughter, had acquired the daughter of Rabbi Ishmael. This master said, I have a male slave whose beauty is unmatched in all of the world. And that master said, I have a female slave whose beauty is unmatched in all of the world. The two masters said, come, let us marry these two slaves to one another and divide the children. This one, the son, sat in one corner, and that one, the daughter, sat in the other corner. He said, I am a priest and the descendant of high priests. Shall I marry a female slave? And she said, I am the daughter of a priest and the descendant of high priests. Shall I be married to a male slave? And they wept all through the night. When dawn arrived, they recognized each other. They fell on each other and burst into tears until their souls departed. And with
Let's
regard
stop
to,
here.
yeah,
We understood the story, right? You see the intergenerational trauma. You see that there is something very pretty about this family. And you see that this prettiness doesn't help them so much in life. And at the end of the day, they are dying, right? I mean, they're sitting in the darkness in the prison. Both sides know that they need to have sex with each other. Both of them know that in the morning, the masters, they will find that they didn't have sex with each other, and there will be implications for that. And only in the morning they find that they were a brother and sister. And the end is that they're dying in the hands of each other. Their
right.
soul departed.
We might add that since they are of priestly descent, right, in the Jewish law, there are extra restrictions for the priests, right? They
Right.
can't marry slaves because viewers might be asking, why don't they just have sexual relations? I mean, of course, they're being abused, but furthermore, they're both of priestly descent, high priests. They know that they're descendants of the high priests.
Right.
And so actually, we didn't read that last part there, Yakir, maybe just for the viewers where they do burst into tears. And should we just read that text? Because
Oh
you
yes, please. I was sure that you
that.
were reading it.
Let's see here. So yeah, yeah. So when the dawn arrived, they recognized each other. They fell on each other and burst into tears until their souls departed. Okay, so we did read that. There's just a follow-up. There's a biblical
Yeah,
passage.
yes.
They
I
refer
mean,
passage in Jeremiah to that is applied to this story.
right, right. So, okay, until now, I think we understand why Rabbi Ishmael is an interesting phenomena, right? I mean, it's not only a rabbi, but it's a rabbi that we bring him in the Talmud because he's going to teach us something very interesting, okay? So the question is, what he's going to teach us, okay? And what I was thinking that we are going to read one more text, which is going to show us what is the big teachings that Rabbi Ishmael was teaching the Jewish people. Okay, I mean, he was teaching a lot, but I want that we will read one of them. And for that, just in order to make sure that our listeners, that it will be for them to understand, we need to do a short introduction about vows. Okay?
Right.
So there is a tractate which called Nedarim, the tractate, the book of vows. And what does it mean to say a vow? A vow means that I'm saying, I promise that I will not do something. And then what happened? Because you vow in the name of the divine. So you cannot do that. So the rabbis, as I shared at the beginning, what they're going to say is, listen, sometimes people made vows, but they don't mean it. Now, how do you say that they don't mean it? Because they meant it. You can say now they don't mean it, but in the past they cared about that. And you cannot go back. You said the name of the divine. So the rabbis are dedicating their time to take this truth, this fact that I said a vow, and to create a narrative, a story that will change the reality. So this is going to be the story of Rabbi Ishmael. So what the case study here? And this is again is going to come to prettiness. in the time of the destruction of the temple, or of the coming years to the destruction of the temple, one of the things that happened was that more and more men, because of the poorness of the Jewish community, women, because of the trauma, women lost their beauty. And the case study that we're going to have here, and it's repeated again and again in the Talmud, is what happened when her husband come to the court, or he come to his wife, and he says, I vow in the name of the divine that I will not have sex with you because you're so ugly. Now we have a woman that she is going to live with no intimacy, right? Because if the husband says, I vow not to have sex with you, he can have sex with the whole world. He can go and pay and to have sex, according to the Jewish tradition. But she's now going to never have intimacy. So the rabbis cannot live in a world where women cannot have intimacy, which is fascinating about the Talmud. There are portion in the Talmud about not let women not to have intimacy. It's fascinating, Isaac. So they're going to bring this husband to Rabbi Ishmael, and Rabbi Ishmael needs to create a narrative that in this narrative, the husband actually didn't mean to say to his wife, I vow because you're so ugly. But she's ugly. I understand. But we are going to create a narrative that she's not ugly. And there is one rabbi who can do it, to see ugliness and to say, husband, I will teach you to see that she's not ugly. This is Rabbi Ishmael. And I think, Isaac, that only Rabbi Ishmael can teach people who see ugliness to see beauty, because he's so pretty and he knows what happened to people who are pretty. They become sex workers. So there is a question of what do you see when you see? And Rabbi Ishmael, his uniqueness, that he disagreed to see ugliness, because he knows that sometimes the prettiness is ugly, and ugly is pretty. And this is why I so wanted, because I think today, in a world where we objectify any man and woman around what is pretty, what is celebrity, what do we want to achieve, this Talmud is something that I'm so proud to be in under the Talmudic tradition.
Right. So just to repeat a few ideas here, we have a tractate in the Talmud called Nedarim, from the word neder, which means vows. And this is a serious matter in the rabbinic tradition. If you make a vow, you got to, some viewers might be saying, what's the big deal? I made my New Year's resolution and I never keep my New Year's resolution. Well, this is, if you make a formal vow, you're now bound by this vow. Words things are treated like realities in their own right, and so we have an entire tractate that deals with this matter. And it seems to me that the Talmud tries to find some loopholes or ways to make it a little more lenient than how some Jews before were taking these vows so seriously.
Right.
It is taken seriously by the rabbinic tradition, but they try to find ways to accommodate in certain situations. Yeah, I guess I remember actually from you, Yakir, when I lived in Israel, sometimes I would ask you something and if you, a favor or something, and you would always answer back, bli neder, bli neder. It was
without a vow.
Without a vow, like, yes, I'll do it, but without a vow. I mean, maybe you could explain what that means, what this expression, what's behind this expression, without a vow. When somebody asks you to do something and you want to do it, but you say without a vow.
I mean, it's a tradition, the ultra-Orthodox tradition, and I think in general, the Jewish tradition is a tradition that it's a lot about narrative. We are not so good in history, we're good in memory, which is very different. And therefore, in order that we will not be lost in narratives, we really try not to say vow or not to promise things, because we know that very easily we can mix between reality and metaphor. So whatever you ask me to do, if I'm not really sure that I'm going to do it, I'm going to say bli neder. Like, I will do it, but I do not vow to do it. And I think it's a way to show seriousness about relationship.
Fascinating.
It's very fascinating. I think that the question, I mean, Hollywood and the Jews, I mean, the Talmud is the text that create the Jewish imagination. And we will see it right now. So let's do this. So after a long reading of pages about like many husband who says, I vow not to touch sexually my wife because she's so ugly, and the rabbi tried to find a way to make her not ugly. I mean, and to tell him, oh, you didn't mean that, right? Like, to create from fact and narrative, we come to a story. So the story starts in English. Let's go down here in the text. And the text is, if it's okay, I will read it just because I know we are short in time.
No worries.
And an incident occurred with regard to one, meaning a husband, who vowed against deriving benefit from the daughter of his sister, meaning he doesn't want to sexually, sister, I mean, it's a horrible translation, because sister, we know that it's a wife. I mean, many times we call a wife a sister, a daughter, the home. There are many ways, which is a different subject, Isaac, I invite us to study in another time.
Right.
And
but daughter of his sister would mean the niece, right?
yes. But what is important is that she is his wife. She is his niece. She is his wife. It's complex.
Which is, I mean,
Sexual relationship.
It's permitted in rabbinic halacha, correct me,
Exactly.
to marry one's niece.
Exactly. Now, and if we have here anyone who listened to these coming lines, and they are good student of Judith Butler, I love it. Judith Butler should study these texts. By the way, I'm sure she knows that text.
Judith Butler, which again, maybe our audience doesn't know.
Sorry, a huge Jewish scholar of queer studies, because it's very important to her teachings, what's going to happen here. Yeah. So what's happened? So now we need to make this husband to believe that he didn't mean to vow when he vowed, right? But what can we do? She's ugly. So now listen to that. So instead of dealing with him, here we have Rabbi Ishmael, and they brought her into the house of Rabbi Ishmael, and what he did? And he beautified her. He made her to become beautiful. Meaning, do you remember that this Rabbi Yehoshua, the ugly rabbi, saw this little baby child, and he said, he's going to be the best Jewish pastor, just best halacha. What this rabbi is doing? He take home ugly women, and he make them to become pretty. Now, the interesting is how you make someone to become pretty. So normally when we say ipua, it means that we put makeup on her. Now we come to Judith Butler. Because what happened? So the husband is coming to the room. He see now a pretty woman. And the Rabbi Ishmael is going to ask him, hey, husband, did you mean to say that this gorgeous woman you don't want to have sex with? And he says, like, oh my God, she's hot. For sure not. And then he said, oh, so your vow was not about reality. Now I want to go to Judith Butler. When you see a woman, Isaac, who is very ugly, but she put incredible makeup, what is the truth? Is she ugly or she's pretty? Right? This is a question that we are everyone is dealing with. Every 12 years old girl, she's dealing with that. When we put makeup, is it actually to show ourselves or to hide ourselves? When I have my body, I'm now 47 years old. I'm not looking exactly as when I was 20 years old. I'm much more handsome. But seriousness now, seriously, my body is my beauty? My soul is my beauty? Is it a combination? And what does it mean to have beauty? Who decide about that? What is the relationship we have as a society with beauty? Because I'm a little bit younger than, I don't know, Brad Pitt. So if Brad Pitt is the most handsome man in the world, probably I'm not so handsome. But I grow up, Isaac, in a community where our celebrities that we thought that they are the most hot people, they were old rabbis in their 70s and 80s, right? And every kid in Purim, when we dress up in our Halloween, what do we want to do? To be rabbis. So what is beauty is seriously not about the objective. There is no objective thing. So when Rabbi Ishmael putting makeup to her, what he actually did he put makeup, or maybe he taught her to see that she's beautiful? Maybe what he did is like in Oscar Wilde book, but the opposite, or Narcissus and the opposite. He took a mirror and he said to the woman, do you know what I see when I look at the mirror? I see a child that his body made men in Rome to rape him as a child again and again and again. I'm so ugly. But maybe, and someone, his name is Rabbi Yehoshua, who is the most ugly person in the Talmud, he released me from not being raped anymore. And he said, I don't care how much money it will cost, this boy is not going to be raped. And then maybe this woman understood that she's pretty. So there was no need for makeup. I don't know what happened there. What, Isaac, I care about is about the dilemma and the story and what we can take from that. So now I want to keep going. So Rabbi Ishmael, they brought her to Rabbi Ishmael and he beautified her. When she was later brought before this one, I mean the husband who took the vow, Rabbi Ishmael said to him, my son, did you vow that you would not have a relationship from this woman? He said to him, no. And Rabbi Ishmael permitted it. So no, the vow is not a vow because she's so pretty. You said that you're not going to have sex with an ugly woman. At the time, Rabbi Ishmael wept and said, and listen to that. This is what I want to end this meeting with. What is the quotation of Rabbi Ishmael? The daughters of Israel are beautiful, but poverty make them ugly. And when Rabbi Ishmael died, the daughters of Israel raised the daughter, not the boys, not the rabbis, the daughters of Israel raised a lamentation saying, daughter of Israel, weep for Rabbi Ishmael, and it likewise state about, and etc., etc. What I want to take from that, Isaac, that the Talmud is the most relevant for today. The difference between the Talmud and boring religious text, for me, that religious texts, most of the time, when I hear pastors or rabbis today, or imams, whatever, Buddhists, they come to you, they take a question and they tell you the answer. I think that religious who give you, any institute who give you answer, I want to run away from. This is why I run away from the ultra-Orthodox. They gave me answers. What I love about the Talmud that he give you ways how to look at the question. And when I'm dealing with question of beauty and body and sexual trauma, I'm so lucky that I have a dear friend and teacher that his name is Rabbi Ishmael. And every time when I see a pretty woman and handsome man, I also think, what's the trauma that they carry with themselves because people objectify them? Do they have real friends? Because how can I be sure that my friends are my friends when I'm so handsome? It's true also about money. It's true about so many powers. And sometimes when I look at the world and I see ugliness, I'm asking myself, Rabbi Ishmael, I really need you tonight. Can you come with me when I reflect in bed? Because maybe the ugliness that I see is not ugliness. It's the poverty of the people, meaning the trauma of the people, the suffering of the people that make them and me sometimes to be ugly, to be horrible human being, to be not kind. And I think this vulnerability is a gift that the Talmud gave me. So I feel so honored and happy and a real todah. Thank you so much, Isaac, for doing these classes and for inviting me to share how I read the Talmud.
Thank to you, Yakir, for this engaging study of the Talmud and showing us really only I think you could share this study in this unique and I'll say beautiful way of the Talmud for our audience. I hope to have you back again sometime in the future, but in the meantime, I want to thank you again for your generosity, your time, and sharing your story, your experience, your perspective on the Talmud. So be well and stay well.